The town of Smithtown was first settled around 1665. 2015 marks the 350th anniversary of the founding of the town of Smithtown. Smithtown is one of the original 10 towns that make up Suffolk County. The town has a colorful and fascinating past, and this year we celebrate its history with many events and festivities. We'll explore this history through a series of programs that look into the past as we look towards the future.
It was a park, and some of the people in there were different, but that's okay. And except for the few places you pass with bars where they may be yelling and screaming, it was a park. Kids played in there, kids walked through it, kids bicycled through there. It was as safe as could be.
Just one big playground, garden spot of the world. Beautiful gardens, trees, grass, well landscaped. Now from a patient's perspective, a lot different.
A lot of patients that we had no visitors. They were put there and nobody came back. So we were their family.
There were sad incidences of people that were really disturbed and needed, at first before mind-altering drugs, they needed straitjackets. That was not pleasant. In a ward of 100 people, I'd say a good 50 of them got up in the morning, got dressed, and went to work. There was all kinds of things. It was a self-contained city. So yeah, the atmosphere was pretty good. It really was.
Hi, I'm Slavisa Milashevska, and welcome to the Smithtown Experience. I'm on the grounds of what was formerly known as the Kings Park Psychiatric Center, known by Kings Park locals as the Psych Center. It was once a massive, self-sustaining, state-run psychiatric hospital, which operated from 1885 to 1996. It's now part of the Nissequogue River State Park. The campus in its prime contained over 100 buildings, including a power plant, a piggery, and a railroad spur. A farm colony asylum, it put patients to work tending livestock and growing their own food as a form of therapy. Over time, the immense population of the center essentially drove the development of the town around it, Kings Park, as staff and families moved closer to their place of employment. It essentially created the town of Kings Park that we know today. While state-run psychiatric centers generally have a negative reputation, the Kings Park Psychiatric Center did its best to rehabilitate and care for its patients. On today's show, we visit with lifelong residents and former employees who share their memories of a time gone by.
My name is Matt O'Reilly. I came to Kings Park in 1929. My junior year of high school, Alan Fields from Kings Park, he was in charge of the post office in the hospital. He called up and asked if I wanted to be a page in the hospital. And I said yes, because in there they gave you room and board and you got a salary. The salary was $30 a month.
When Pearl Harbor was attacked on December 7, 1941, Matty enlisted in the Army and served for 3 years. When he arrived back home, Matty went back to the Psych Center and would end up working at the center for 37 years. He would see many changes over the years, including the closing of the center in 1996. We followed Matty as he gave us an impromptu tour of what remains of the facility.
This building located behind me right here is Building 93. I believe it was built right after the war or just prior to the war in 1942. Now it housed, I don't know how many patients, but it was one of the main places for some treatments, one of which was electric shock treatment for the patients. In itself, it was an excellent building, but it was new and had whatever you needed for the medicine. As time went by and things improved, you built buildings to accommodate them, which we have all over the hospital here. Yeah. In a sense, when you think about what this place accomplished and what it did for our town and our village and that, it was awesome. But this was the place to be in when you worked, you know, and it was 12-hour shifts, 5-day pass, and I mean, be on time. This building you see behind me is Home T. It was one of the big homes in the hospital grounds, because one of the incentives that people had to work here was that when you got hired, you automatically got room and board. And places like Home T provided that. In fact, after the war and the population started to increase and there wasn't enough people to work here, they used to send groups down to South, and they would recruit Southern people to come up here to work. But all of those things you see covering the windows, they were done by the school districts between Kings Park and Smithtown and Northport to cover the windows, and what a beautiful sight they are. As I stand here looking around, I remember it's been a long time since I was working up here, and I worked in the linen room between 85 and 86 over there. And then right up here, like I say, with these houses were for the doctors. It was a whole beautiful atmosphere. And then right there was the big buildings, 57 and 8, and then over there further was 55 and 6. But that was part of the overall veterans unit here. This building you see behind me here is the greenhouse, which seems to have been here forever. And it supplied the hospital, most of it, but one of the smaller, with a lot of the plants and so forth, you know, for the different holidays or whatever else, and for what was planted along the grounds of that. This building behind me is York Hall, which serves so many purposes in the hospital and outside the hospital. The Legion had parties here on Sunday, sponsored by Nassau American Legion, and we would bring the patients from the veterans unit, but this served so many purposes. And also was the masses and the churches, they all used this for the different prayer services. They used to have these dance clubs, and they'd bring the patients down here, and they'd have music and that, and they'd have dances. Overall, this place was it. All right, this area that behind me is the railroad tracks used to come across here, because way back when, the trains brought in all the supplies to the hospital. So the tracks ran along here, right alongside a Group 2 female, where we held the sewing room and the patient's ward. And so it came here and over the road and in there. That's where the storehouse was in the old days. But basically, this is where all of the action was, and that's when the hospital was small. But as the hospital grew, so did everything have to grow too. And it's just like here, you know. The area we're located right now is off of Indian Head Road. It's a cemetery relating to the hospital. And when the hospital cemetery, it's like a potter's field. There's only the identification in there of a bottle, which they put into the name and everything of the person, and then they sealed it, and then they had a wooden box casket. But you can look at this here, it's well kept in the sense that there's no markers or nothing. Everything is underground, and the only records they have of who's who and where they're at is probably down in the main office. It's people that have no families, that they had nobody to contact when they died. So this was their fate, was to come up here and be buried in a linda. And in a sense, this would be our Calverton for civilians, you know, in a way when you looked at it. But that was about it. We took care of the patients, and God takes care of them now.
In its prime, the Kings Park Psych Center was essentially a city unto itself and drove the development of the town around it, Kings Park. The people of Kings Park utilized the facility as much as the patients, and it was never thought of as a depressing or unsafe place.
The atmosphere was upbeat, cheerful, and starting with the beautiful, idyllic grounds, open space, you know, and what beautiful views from Building 93 where I worked. From those top floors up there, you know, facing the Long Island Sound. Just one big playground, garden spot of the world. You know, beautiful gardens, trees, grass, well landscaped.
Everybody rode their bicycles, and we'd always ride our bicycles. I don't know that anyone was afraid, you know. I think now if you said we needed to have a hospital and have people would be worrying about their property values and whatever else. And the people in our development were fine with it.
It was a park, and some of the people in there were different, but that's okay. And except for the few places you pass with bars where they may be yelling and screaming, it was a park. Kids played in there, kids walked through there, kids bicycled through there. It was as safe as could be.
All kinds of things were going on. There was a library. There was, you know, a post office. There was all kinds of things. It was a self-contained city. So yeah, the atmosphere was pretty good. It really was.
The hospital itself was excellent. It was whatever, you know, but it was good. It was never cruel. You might have an isolated thing here. I never heard of it or seen it, but it was always first class.
When this hospital was here, it was not a group of nutty people all. You could go to someone's house on 4th of July or Christmas or Thanksgiving, there would be people sitting there and you'd wind up talking to the people. And they were patients from the hospital who the people in this house felt sorry that they were going to be left alone and they had to bring them home. It happened so many times, it was a typical ritual.
I miss the community sense that the hospital had, because we don't have that anymore. We truly don't. You couldn't go anywhere in Kings Park that you didn't see somebody you worked with. When I first went to college, nobody knew where Kings Park was until they would come out with me on the weekends and we would visit and we'd drive through the grounds and they were in awe of the place. They would say, wow, just look at the gardens. Look at the reservoir. And look at the boat basin, because we had a boat basin then, and if you worked at the hospital, you could have a boat down the boat basin.
They were our friends also, not just patients. We didn't look at them as patients. And if people called it funny names like Funny Farm or Nut House, I said, don't talk to me no more. I'm not talking to you, because I lived it. It was a real busy, busy place.
By the time Kings Park reaches peak patient population, the old rest and relaxation philosophy surrounding farming had been succeeded by more invasive techniques, such as prefrontal lobotomies and electroshock therapy. The advent of new drugs led to the sharp population decline and ultimately the closing of the facility.
The first drug that came out in mass was Thorazine. That was back in the mid-70s, maybe, I'm guessing, that Thorazine came in. Before that, they used shock treatment and lobotomies that they don't do no more. Matter of fact, straitjackets. The only way they can put a straitjacket on a patient is have the doctor put a prescription in. If the ward had 40 or 50 patients and they're all out of hand, it's quite a scene. If they're all on Thorazine and you calm them down, at least you can function. And you put them in a straitjacket and he's still screaming. Give him Thorazine and he'll calm right down.
It was the end of people in straitjackets and bed sheets. They had been outlawed. Even people that were taking medication, they still needed someone to make sure they were taking it, to make sure they were clean, to make sure they were fed. Once they were sent out into the streets, many of them became homeless.
As medication made it possible for patients to live normal lives outside of a mental institution, the need for large facilities such as Kings Park diminished. Although some patients were able to assimilate into society, many patients were left behind.
I'm sad that I see right now that there's no place we don't treat mentally ill people very well anymore. And being in jail and being put in solitary and those kinds of things that we hear now, I mean, it's a terrible thing. And when you could see, you can't cure everyone if they have a problem, but at least they were taken care of. They weren't in a jail, they weren't in a solitary confinement. And I think we need more places, maybe not like this, but we need places.
Over the years, the Psych Center would see thousands of patients come through its doors. While most were anonymous, one of the more famous patients was Percy Crosby, an American author, illustrator, and cartoonist, best known for his popular comic strip, Skippy. Crosby's cartoon Skippy premiered in Life magazine in 1923 and quickly became a success. The strip focused on Skippy Skinner, a young boy living in the city. Skippy was an odd mix of mischief and melancholy who might equally be found stealing from the corner fruit stand to failing to master baseball. It became a syndicated comic strip, and there were Skippy dolls, toys, comic books, and novels. The comic was adapted as the 1931 movie Skippy by Paramount Pictures. The movie became a hit and starred Jackie Cooper, who played the title role. It won the director Norman Taurog the Academy Award for Best Director. Despite his success, Crosby battled alcoholism, and in December 1948, he was committed to the psychiatric ward of Bellevue Hospital after attempting suicide following the death of his mother. In 1949, he was transferred to the mental ward at the Kings Park Psych Center, where he was declared a paranoid schizophrenic. He would spend the last 16 years of his life at the center.
I met him and I was impressed with his kind of an artistic look. He was so well dressed. He had an ascot, you know, and old pants and a shirt. But even as a patient, he looked like a classy guy. And I remember him telling me, oh, the government stole thousands of acres from me. He had a big place in Virginia, a farm. But I didn't, you know, and then the day after I left, the nurse told me that Percy Crosby thought I was a plant from the CIA or something, so it might have been some kind of paranoid delusions, I think, you know. I'm not a doctor. He seemed pleasant when I talked to him.
And it turns out Crosby's the Walt Disney prior to the Second World War. He's got a place in Florida, he's got a place in Virginia, he's got a place up here. He has a bad habit, though. He gets married too many times. One of his wives, the last wife he had, happens to have a relative in a good position, high position in the hospital. And she talks to the relative and says, I think there's something wrong with him. He's writing out too much material, doing too much stuff dealing with the communists. And he's forever writing letters to the government, the communists don't go. So, well, bring him in and we'll give him a test and we'll find out if he's balanced and things. He came and never left. And I think it's 16 years he stayed there. In that process, all his wealth disappeared. It turns out that in the books that we found, one of the chief things he did, he had Skippy, the movie character. And the movie character is a famous guy, Coogan. Everybody that's over 10 years old knows who he is. Jackie Cooper and Coogan were two that always played as child actors. And it was a long series. Downstairs, there's big, more than life-size caricatures of things. And everybody wants to test that to be from him. I don't know, I've seen them. The worst thing they did is they try to hack some of it out. And of course, it's this thick, cementing things, and broke up and they lost most of it. This man was a true artist.
Though Percy Crosby spent the last 16 years of his life institutionalized, he continued to produce artwork and manuscripts, although none of these works were published. He died at the Psych Center in 1964 on his 73rd birthday. To this day, he remains as one of the most famous patients to be treated at the hospital. While Piercy Crosby might be the most famous patient, it was also home to one of the first pioneers of unmanned aerial photography, Vito Caponetta. In this day of aerial drones and GoPros, Vito was way ahead of his time.
I don't know, I think he used balsam wood so we could get up in the kite. And he made a little box and he painted it black. And then he got some old 4x5 lenses from the photo lab, either from an 8x10 camera or a 4x5 camera, a 5x7 camera. And he attached them and hooked them onto a kite that he assembled. It was an old World War II Army surplus kite, I think, with about 2 or 3, 4 strings, you know. And they put ice on it, and the ice would melt and trip the shutter. And eventually he'd get a shot. And the reason they're a fisheye is because the lenses were made for a great big 8x10 camera, or 5x7, and he had them on this little box, maybe 4x4x3. Then he put it together and painted it like a dull black. And then he stuck maybe cut some film down and stuck it in there.
He made this kite and the camera, and we gave him a room in the storehouse for him to develop his pictures in. And it was really tough to do because he would take a whole roll of film and then with one picture, because he can't focus it from the ground. So he would end up with, I don't know how many pictures are in a roll, 24. He would end up with one picture and the other 23 were no good.
You know, I could never understand why he was a patient. He seemed sharp and normal, you know. Eventually, he became an employee. And he moved into home tea where I had been living for the last 20 years, you know. And then he had a job in the cleaning department, housekeeping.
I don't know why he was put in there, but I know that a lot of patients that we had no visitors. They were put there and nobody came back. So we were their family. Sunday and Wednesday was visiting day, and we were there on Wednesday. Sundays the storehouse was closed. So we were their family, and we were their visitors and whatever, and Vito happened to be one of them.
He liked his harmonica. He played the harmonica a lot, and, you know. And he was a great tennis player because he was adjacent to the tennis courts where he spent every day. And he was teaching local housewives here in town how to play tennis. I played with him. He was in his 60s then, and I was in my 30s. And I was huffing and puffing, and with so much grace and ease, he beat me because of his skill, and he hardly ever moved around the court. So, very talented guy. He died around 1990 when he was 80 years old.
Vito Caponetta was truly ahead of his time. His unmanned aerial photography left a legacy of images that are still looked at today with wonder and awe. Today, the sprawling area that once housed the Kings Park Psychiatric Center stands as a testament to a forgotten era. Some buildings have been removed, and the towering smokestack on the site was imploded in 2013. The former rail spur, abandoned in the late 1980s, was converted into part of a hike and bike trail. Approximately 368 acres were added to the Nissequogue River State Park. The question still remains, what should become of this once thriving facility?
When the hospital was first closed, they had a lot of offers. The county wanted to buy a building, the YMCA wanted to buy the rec building. The police department wanted to buy a building because up until that point, many of the organizations were spread all over the place. They had 5 or 6 buildings. This way they would have had one building where they could have housed themselves, like the county. They were turned down. The state wanted no part of breaking it up and doing that to it. And I thought that was a mistake. I don't know if they could put anybody in those buildings now because many of them are in very bad state. They've been vandalized, there have been fires. So I don't know. I'm just hoping that when they tear down the buildings, they leave something so that those people that wander through it will remember what it was.
Engineers and earth movers have now joined nature and vandals in the slow dismantling of the Kings Park Psych Center. For now, the site remains one very strange park, a place where you can launch a canoe or wander the grounds of a rotting asylum. Nearly all of what remains at the site is abandoned. Today, the Kings Park Psychiatric Center stands as a testament to a bygone era, but the problem it sought to address initially remains unsolved. For the Smithtown Experience, I'm Slavica Milashevska, and thanks for watching.